just finished my file. Buongiorno. Io vorrei aspettare che il... sorry, I switched to English. I'm sorry, it's been a rough morning. I would like to wait for the theater to be full, but there is another event coming after us, so I'm afraid we will have to start anyway. So we are sorry for the delay, but I see that people are coming in and more people will come in. So I want to start thanking the festival for having us here. And I'm sorry if some of you were at the local call panel yesterday. I'm going to repeat the same stuff, but I think it's very important for those of you who weren't. Okay. So me, Arianna, and Chris started thinking about this panel basically immediately after October 7, 2023. But of course, the Plus 972 team and local call were super busy, so they couldn't make it. So thank you to Arianna and Chris for waiting. And I think that the fact that they are here 1 year after what we planned makes maybe even more sense, because the work that they have been doing during this year is really amazing. So I did not introduce myself. I'm Francesca Caferri. I work for La Repubblica. And let me introduce our speakers, which are the most important thing. Ghousoon Bisharat is the editor-in-chief of Plus 972 magazine. She's an amazing journalist. She has 20 years of experience with international media, the European Union, and she's a Palestinian citizen of Israel living in the wonderful city of Haifa. Meron Rapoport is the editor of Local Call, which, as some of you may know, is kind of a twin publication. We know Plus 972 because it's the English version, but they also work for Local Call, which is the Hebrew version, is the Hebrew magazine. We have been discussing about their work yesterday, so if you're interested, please go to the website and download the recording of the conference. And then we have Yuval Abraham sitting next to me, an Israeli investigative journalist who is writing for Plus 972 and for Local Call, and is also the co-director of the documentary No Other Land, which won a lot of prizes all over the world. The last one is the Oscar. And Oren Ziv is a reporter and is also a great photographer. He works for Local Call and Plus 972 magazine, and he is the co-founder of Active Steel Collective. Please check his pictures, because not only his articles, but also his pictures are great. So I want to start with you, Yuval, and I will ask you to sum up your findings, your investigations, because when they came out the first time, I just read it and I said, wow, Yuval has been doing some amazing investigation of the use of artificial intelligence by the IDF and the impact that this had in Gaza. And somehow, I mean, when you publish it, it was quite at the very beginning of the war. So now we see the consequences of these policies. So if you can tell us what's the role of AI, what's the role of big tech, and which are the consequences?
Yes, hi, thank you for inviting us to the festival. I think we can see the consequences, of course, the tens of thousands of people who are killed in Gaza. And I want to say, first, especially in that kind of context where so many atrocities are being done in the name of our security, so-called. I'm a little bit embarrassed of the checkpoint at the entrance. I think that, it's not us that need protection, it's the people of Gaza who need protection, like Meron said yesterday. And we had two major investigations. The first was related to the ICC, to the International Criminal Court, and it revealed a 9-year campaign of the Israeli intelligence community to spy on the ICC, including on the current chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, and the former prosecutor, Ben Souda. And this was a campaign that involved intimidation. We worked on, the pieces came out with The Guardian, so it was, it uncovered that the head of the Mossad, Yossi Cohen, intimidated Benesouda in order to get her to drop the Palestine case in the ICC. And also that there was spying against the Palestinians who wanted to give testimonies to the ICC against journalists, human rights workers, in an attempt to basically to sabotage the case or to make it not reach the stage that it ended up reaching, which is the arrest warrants that were issued. The investigation about Gaza, we published one month after October 7th started, and another in April. It's very long investigations. There is a lot to uncover. The issue that caught the most interest was the use of AI. So the Israeli military developed a program called Lavender, which is a machine learning-based program, which essentially gave a rating to most of the 2 million people in Gaza, determining how likely it was that they were militants in the Hamas or Islamic Jihad military wings. And this was done in a machine learning way. So the military had a list of people it said were militants, according to their data. It analyzed their characteristics, they're called features. And this was then, the check was how the general population, how similar they are to this existing list of militants. And the crucial thing is that this system, this AI-based system, which was used for life and death decisions, was deployed despite the army knowing that it makes what are defined as errors or mistakes at 10% of its findings. So it created a list. The numbers varied, but of around 37,000 individuals. And the military knew that thousands of these individuals were actually not militants. They had maybe a loose connection to a military wing or no connection at all. They had similar profiles to a militant. But if you think about it, a lot of people can have similar profile. I mean, the head of Unit 8200 wrote a book in 2021 about these kinds of machines. And he gives examples for these characteristics that may, make a machine learning algorithm mark someone as a suspect. And some of them can be, being in a WhatsApp group with a militant, or changing phones every few months. I mean, I change phones every few months. I'm a journalist, right? So you can think of how these mistakes happen in a way, but this wasn't a mistake because there was a conscious decision to allow officers, especially during the first few months, to rely on this system without verifying it, without checking why it made its decisions. There was a statistical approach, as one source told me, to mistakes, meaning we know that we are killing as targets civilians every once in a while, but we accept it in order to be able to generate more targets. And I have to say that while the focus is on AI and it's a buzzword and people are very much interested in it, I still think that the most consequential policies are human policies. These are human decisions at the end of the day. It's not only human beings who designed Lavender, but actually the most horrendous policy in my mind that we discovered was the policy to systematically target militants or alleged militants when they're inside their houses, while authorizing to kill for the junior ranking ones up to 20 civilians. And for the senior, more senior commanders, the numbers were in the hundreds. So I know of cases where the military is knowingly authorizing to kill 300 civilians to wipe out an entire residential block in order to try to assassinate one person. So it's like if a bomb was dropped here and killed all of us because Italy would think that there is one dangerous person in the hall. And these are numbers that we uncovered, and it was followed up by the New York Times and later on other big prominent media outlets confirmed those numbers. And I'm sorry, I'm using this word collateral damage. It's a military word. Like human beings are not collateral damage. It's if you kill 300 people, doesn't matter what your target was. It's a massacre, and it cannot be justified in any way. So I think these just touching on it, there is much more, but this is a brief overview of some of our findings. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think. So this is part of what Local Call and Plus 972 magazine did in this month. Another very important part was the West Bank, which has been for months and I want to include myself, my newspaper, the forgotten side of this crisis. We were all so busy reporting about Gaza, not from Gaza, but about Gaza or about the hostages, that somehow we forgot what was going on in the West Bank. And what's going on in the West Bank is scary. It's scary. It's really, really bad. So we forgot. Oren did not forget, because, I mean, you were always going to the West Bank. You uncovered several things, but what we will talk about this later, the displacement. What I would like you to talk about is what you found within Israel. You have been writing about torture in the Israeli detention centers. You have been writing about, prisoners, everything that was going on. You had access to so many sources who told you who touched with you some of the most controversial issues when it comes to talking about Israel and the Palestinian. Because as we said yesterday, Israeli journalism can be very strong, very effective, very interesting when it comes to corruption, to many issues, but not when it comes to the Palestinian issues. It's like if most of the media close their eyes and don't see what's going on. Oren, you were able to write about these things.
Yes.
How did you do it? Can you sum up what you find?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. And it's important also for us to send solidarity for the Palestinians and Lebanese journalists that are working in unbelievable conditions. Some of our colleagues who write also on 972 and other colleagues who work for media outlets. Yes, I think from the very beginning of the war, there was a complete crackdown on freedom of speech. Not that it was great before, but the police, the different agencies, especially following May 2021 riots and uprising inside Israel in the West Bank and Gaza, they were ready, and there was a crackdown on protest. We heard the chief of staff saying whoever will protest in Gaza can be sent to Gaza on buses. I'm talking on Palestinian citizens of Israel. And this silencing, of course, affected the media, bloggers, influencers, everyone. And in this atmosphere, in the first weeks or months, it was very hard to work, to get to sources, to speak, to say very basic messages, to remind, as Meron said yesterday, what was happening on October 6th and what's happening on October 8th. We did a few investigations. I will touch shortly on
Yes.
two of them. So one of them that had a few parts was talking to Israeli soldiers on the ground that were in Gaza in the first weeks and months of the war. And it was very hard because there was a big sense of revenge and anger, and people didn't want to speak on what's happening there. We did manage to find soldiers, both reservist and mandatory service, that agreed to speak on what they saw there. And I think beside one of the most tragic thing we heard from them was that there was no limit on opening fire at civilians, at buildings, at infrastructure. Everything could be a target. Every target, even sensitive things that before the war should have been approved, like schools, like university, everything could be a target. And this was from high up in the command to the simple soldier on the ground that could decide where to shoot, what to destroy. One of the headlines was, "I'm bored, so I shoot." Many soldiers described to us that they were just waiting and guarding a place, and they were shooting for fun or from being bored or wanting to be part of the action. Basically, the rule of engagements in fire were not that before they were protecting civilians, but afterwards there were no limits. So soldiers told that inside Gaza there was an invisible line that if Palestinians, even children, women, elderly people cross, they can be shot to death. Some soldiers that talked to us said that some people didn't implement it, but these were the orders, these were the official orders. And all the different things we saw also on social media, looting, vandalizing, political graffiti, setting houses on fire, these were things that were very common. I think when we talk to soldiers in Gaza, it's very important to remember that it's not only the extreme right and the different things sometimes we see on media, the crazy right wings who want to settle in Gaza and do this protest to resettle in Gaza. This is the mainstream Israeli society. We had inside Gaza more than 100,000 soldiers during the first year. And this kind of things, looting, burning houses, of course, torture also, we can speak about it later, this was done by all parts of the army. We talked to soldiers that said that all these things were not abnormal, they were the common practice. You had it in all units with the commanders, at least the medium-range commanders in the field, knowing that it's happening. Burning up houses was official policy. After leaving a house, that so Israeli soldiers were stationed inside Palestinian houses in Gaza as a temporary army basis. When they would move a house, they would set it on fire. They had different explanations, but the common idea was that Palestinians cannot go back. And also soldiers told us that, and this connects also to the prison, that the main atmosphere was a sense of revenge, that there's no innocent people in Gaza, that everybody was happy after October 7, after everybody is involved with Hamas, and so on and so on. And it's important to see that we heard those kind of phrases from politicians, from the prime minister, from the president, from ministers, not only extreme right, also center right and center. And this kind of approach went down from really up to the soldier on the ground that felt they can do whatever they want. We also spoke to the army. There's very few cases that people were tried or punished for these acts, and we can understand it's from a broader policy to punish all the Palestinians and to try to force them out of Gaza. If I have another half a minute regarding the prisons, I think, you know, Minister Ben Gvir tried, since he was elected before October 7, to punish the prisoners, to change the condition. Palestinian political prisoners, through the years, are a very organized community. They have a lot of power inside, not only inside the prison, but also outside, because they're the main reason that Palestinians in the West Bank, at least, but also in Gaza, can mobilize. We've seen in the past, in hunger strikes, when Palestinian prisoners were tortured or died in Israeli prison, there was a reaction from Gaza, there was a reaction from the West Bank, and therefore they are organized inside prisons, in unions, and by political fractions, and they had some leverage in front of the Israeli government for generations. And Ben Gvir tried to crash it, from the beginning. And the war was a great opportunity when all eyes were on Gaza and southern Israel and the hostages. He did a horrific change in the prison. We have over 70 Palestinian prisoners that died in captivity since October 7. And just to say that from the occupation of 67 till October 7, it was more or less the same number in 56 years.
I would like you to... I would like you to take a moment and think about what we just heard from Yuval and from Oren, because, I mean, this is like how difficult, we'll talk about this later, but how difficult it is to have somebody telling you, yes, I can shoot to anybody, I mean, or yes, we are allowed to target somebody even if we know that there is his entire family around. It's very difficult to have sources telling you such important things. They were able to do it. And it's amazing because first of all, I'm a fan of Plus 972. So I'm a reader. And so when I went twice to their editorial meeting in Tel Aviv, and I thought it was going to be a big newsroom with many people, and it's such a small group of people, and you do an amazing job. So that's why, once again, it's so important to have you here. But there is something, Meron, there is something that we don't know. I didn't realize it up to a certain point. It took me some time to get there. That each piece of information that you publish on local call or Plus 972 has to go through military censorship. No? When we talk about the location of the troops, the numbers, everything has to go through it. So that was your job, part of your job, because Meron is an amazing editor, but part of your job was dealing with censorship. How did you do it? Did they prevent you from running something, and why did they let you run this kind of information?
First of all, again, thank you for coming. Of course, it is not only for us, for 972 local call. Every piece of information, Israel, I think, is the only country, at least in what is called Western democracies, that anything that you publish that regards the army and even some kind of international relations, oil supply to Israel, any news has to go to a military censorship. It is under the Ministry of Defense, and you have to go to them. It is always, you don't know what will be the outcome. We annually, we publish some kind of report about the interference of the censorship. And for example, in 2023, there were 613 articles that were completely deleted by the censorship, and more than 2,700 in which the censorship interfered. And in 2024, it's not yet published, it will be published in the next few days, there were 6,000 pieces in which the censorship interfered, and 1,500 that were completely deleted. Of course, this makes the problem is, of course, the fact that you don't know what could be published. And the problem is not only what is being deleted or being interfered, the problem is the self-censorship that you apply on yourself, because you know that when I am more, my work is more on the editorial side. I write, of course, analysis, but I'm more on the editorial side, working with Yuval, working with Oren and other journalists. But there are so many things that we don't even investigate because we know that they will not be published. So there's a whole range. I can tell you a small anecdote. You know, I was in the beginning of my career, and I was a foreign news editor in one of the newspapers, a bigger newspaper in Israel, and there was a press conference with Shimon Peres, who was then the foreign minister, and there was time for question, and I rose and I asked, what about Israel's nuclear program? And not only Peres completely ignored my question, all the journalists looked at me as if I am mad, that I don't know that these are questions that you just don't ask. So it's a great self-censorship. I can give you an example for and how it affected us. For example, there was a story by Yuval in which we, in the beginning, already in the beginning of the war, we understood that one of the methods used by Israel to kill militants in the tunnels in Gaza was to use bunker buster bombs that detonate inside the ground, and that when they are detonated inside the ground, inside the tunnels, they spread lethal gas. This is how Palestinian militants were supposed to be killed by gas. Now, we knew from the beginning that this is very sensitive for a Jewish state to use gas as a lethal weapon, with all the meanings of it, and we knew from the beginning that it will be difficult. And we had a lot of problem with the censorship when we first published the first version of the story in January 24. Later on, as it was revealed that hostages, Israeli hostages, died suffocated by this gas, and they started talking about it, and the media started talking about it, then the censorship allowed us to have a much more detailed story later in the end of 24. So it's not only the fact that news is being barred from being published, is the self-censorship that applies to all journalists in all the media, including us.
Ghousoon, what's the importance of this kind of investigations? I mean, I said at the very beginning, I'm happy you came this year, not last year, because, I mean, during the last 12 months, 15 months actually, your brand, your name, Local Call, plus 972 became internationally recognized. But you're a small team. How important it is? Which are the consequences? What are the most read articles on your website?
Thank you again for having us. The most important element of these investigations done by Yuval and Oren is that they are exposing the crimes. They're on too many different topics, too many different issues, but they're exposing crimes. And all of this information is out there now. It gives the tools for human rights organizations, for human rights defenders, international law experts, the international law system, and activists to continue campaigning. These investigations, I believe, empower people, organizations, societies to act and demand accountability and justice. There's another piece of investigation that Yuval did in the first month of the war. It was published on October 30th, 23, that has another importance. It was one document that Yuval exposed from the intelligence ministry that showed how the idea of population transfer, ethnic cleansing, basically, population transfer to Sinai, is reaching official discussions. This was exposed only like 3 weeks after October 7th, and here we alerted the world about what may become an official policy, and it is now discussed, you know, between Israel and Trump, and there is a big dilemma here. Like, after all these investigations, for me, at least, and I'm sure it's shared by my colleagues here, is that for me as a Palestinian journalist, we do all this work, but nothing is changing. And it's a big, it's dilemma, it's frustrating as well that you do all this work and the reality is not changing, or, at least we couldn't stop the war, or the war has not been stopped by others who are continuing the work and campaigning for accountability and justice. The second element is that these investigations, or many of these investigations, we had too many investigations, reaffirmed what Palestinian journalists have been saying all along. Some of the information we exposed was not new. It was only confirmed by Israeli sources, whether soldiers on the ground or military, intelligence sources. And also it's very important to mention that in all these investigations, Palestinian journalists and editors were involved. Because we are a binational media outlet, it means that on every piece, or in many pieces, we have both, Jewish Israelis and Palestinians involved in different stages of the reporting and editing. Like Palestinian journalists from Gaza helped confirm some of the information that Oren and Yuval exposed by collecting eyewitnesses' accounts, confirming locations sometimes. Yes, indeed, this happened in this place and 300 people were killed as a result of an Israeli missile. Maybe they were not in the byline, but they were involved. Palestinian editors were involved in the editing process as well. And I think that makes, a whole difference in the way the investigation is framed. Through, though, all the information or most of the information was coming from Israeli sources, we always had Palestinian eyewitnesses, we had Palestinian testimonies, we always included human rights activists and human rights experts who were able to put all of this info, all of these very long reports into context and challenge some of the information that is coming from the sources. The last point about these investigations and their importance globally, I think these investigations showed the importance of independent media. Not only independent media that is based in Israel-Palestine, but independent media at large, all around the world, and especially independent media that holds the highest professional standards and is committed to clear and uncompromising political principles. As Francesca mentioned, we are a very small media outlet, at least I'm talking about 972. Meron maybe can share more about Local Call. We are only 6 full-time staff. Yuval is divided between 972 and Local Call. Oren is full-time Local Call, but we publish most of his work. But we have also, we have a huge network of freelance journalists and contributors throughout the land, like everywhere. And being independent is basically allowing us to operate outside the mechanism of interests of corporate media. We are not aligned politically with any political party in Israel-Palestine. We are genuinely and fiercely independent and totally in charge of our editorial decision. This allowed us to be the pioneers in exposing these crimes, in pushing the boundaries, in challenging power. The legacy media, as Yuval mentioned, caught up much later and confirmed, again, many of the information in our investigations. Obviously, these investigations also, took us to the global arena. We became a major player in international conversation about Israel-Palestine. Our journalists and editors are interviewed, weekly on, the biggest TV channels, newspapers all around the world. Our readership increased by tenfold since October 23. The monthly reader average in the year before October 23 was about 20,000 readers. The average between October 23 and October 24 is more than 200,000. The monthly page views is, of course, more than double of that. And with that comes, lots of responsibility. It's even, scary sometimes to have this, global exposure and recognition.
Yeah. Thank you for touching this point, because I was trying to keep my introduction short because we started late, but it's important to say that this is a mixed team of Israeli Jews, Israeli Palestinian, Palestinians on the ground in the West Bank, Palestinians in Gaza, and they were one of the few, if not the only ones, who were able to bring Palestinian voices in Hebrew, first of all, and then in English from Gaza throughout this month. Short question, short answer, because time is running. But going back to Meron, Ghousoon told us about the global recognition. What about Israel? How are you perceived in Israel?
I must admit that, unfortunately, in Israel, the reaction to our investigations, including one in which it was clear that even Israeli hostages are being harmed or killed, almost not knowingly, but at least recklessly by the Israeli army. Even these kind of investigation and the use of gas as a method was not really too much followed by the Israeli public, maybe traumatized, maybe for many reasons. When we did have more impact on Israeli public opinion or public press is when we worked together with The Guardian. It appeared together with The Guardian, or it was taken later by major international news outlets like the New York Times, or then it came back to Israel via this international news organization. But I will try to be brief here. There is, it was talked about in another session, I think yesterday. This war is unique, I think, maybe since World War II, in which no foreign journalists were allowed into Gaza. This war was covered only from one side, from the Israeli side. Israel controls the exit and entry to Gaza, and it didn't allow foreign journalists to come in. So all the information about Gaza was due to, first of all, very courageous Palestinian journalists. Some of them worked for us, but many of them, of course, are not working for us. More than 200 of them lost their life, were killed by Israelis. So there is here a huge gap to fill, because Palestinian, yes, they are under attack. Palestinian journalists are very brave. They want to tell the story, but they are limited in movement. They cannot really move from place to place. So here there is a gap. And I think we, with our work, with the Palestinian journalists who wrote for 972 and retranslated in local call, and we, as I would say, dissident Israeli journalists who did not accept the main story, we had a special role here to fill this gap. And I think, as Ghousoon said, I think we had a lot on our shoulders because of this special role. I hope we did a decent work in this. It's not, as Ghousoon said, very, very, very frustrating that with all the investigation we did, and we did some important investigation, we didn't stop the war. The war is going on. Innocent people are being killed in Gaza every day, and we didn't stop it. But at least we made some awareness in the world, and maybe even in Israel, around what's going on.
I'm sure you did. So Yuval, I have the privilege to ask you my question, which was my first question when I read your first investigation on artificial intelligence, which is like, how did you do it? I just read it and I said, okay, how is this possible that somebody came and talked to him about these things? Why did I decide to talk to you?
I have to be short, right?
You have 5 minutes.
The short answer is because I asked them too nicely. And the longer is, I mean, I think there are a couple of factors. First of all, the Israeli media, as was said, it's not only that they're not interested in looking for stories that are critical of the military, that are critical of the war, that are looking at human rights abuses and crimes, most of the Israeli media. I think even media outlets that are more critical or more left-leaning often tend to focus on individual actions of soldiers or crimes that were committed because they were against the rules or against the military's own protocol. And if I look at something that connects much of our work, is that we are focused on the protocol itself, on the rules themselves. We are looking at the decisions that are taken high up and go down. And to me, this is what is the most important and also the most deadly, in a way, for the Palestinians in Gaza and generally. So I'm generally in my journalism, I'm much more interested not in, there is a settler attack happening in Masafriata, for example, like you see in the documentary, no other land. So not in the individual settler who committed an attack, and then to frame it like it's against the Israeli law, but actually it's the Israeli law, it's the policy of destroying houses, which is systemized, which is legalized, and it has the same goal, to take the Palestinians out of that area. So likewise in Gaza, we were interested in the collateral damage degrees, in the way that the military designed its infrastructure, and not, I think many journalists are interested in that. And therefore, when I approached some people, not all of them, of course, but some of the sources that I spoke with, they were drafted or redrafted into the intelligence community after October 7th. They were shocked by the massacre of Hamas, by the atrocities of October 7th, by the hostages. And very quickly, they realized that they were now involved in atrocities. And some of them, when I talked to them, they said, we waited for months for some journalist to approach us because, and this is the ideological group, people that are like whistleblowers that felt that, they have committed crimes or they've harmed, Palestinian families, they've killed people, and they wanted the Israelis actually to know about it. The other group of people that agreed to talk to me, it's like the opposite perspective. They don't see what is wrong with what they did. So it's more like, not to brag, but like I call them, I'm an Israeli, I have a good Israeli accent, I'm not threatening. And they just talk, because they don't see what the problem is. And I think generally sometimes people, when you're curious and you want to know, and sometimes people agree to do it. And yes, I think the last thing I will say is that it also takes a lot of time. As was said, we are a very small team. And really the investigations are often based on, as many journalists know, on building a network of sources and people. And sometimes you don't know even what it will be useful for. And we worked for years and years, it's before October 7th, for I think more than 2 years to build a network of this kind. And yes, and I'm very grateful to the editors and to the entire team because it's really, we're a small team, but it's really a team effort for all of these investigations. And I hope we can continue because there is a lot of work still to do.
Absolutely. Oren, Yuval just said the protocol, the protocol itself. So there was a report last week by Peace Now, which says that Israel seized more land from the West Bank from October 7, 2023. They seized more land than what they did in the previous 20 years, something like that. I was always impressed by the fact that each time I was coming, it's like I'm here, and it's like I'm in Ramallah, I'm in the West Bank. You never forgot the West Bank. You went there, you kept on going there, even if the main focus was Gaza or the hostages. And you were able to report about the displacement of the West Bank communities in depth. Can you tell us what's going on over there?
Yes, thank you for the question. So this is also a story that we worked long before October 7. So in recent years, the classic settler outpost, settlements that in the beginning are illegal even according to Israeli law and then get legalized, and this is we won't get into all the history, but this was the main tactic of the settler for many years, putting some caravans, some electricity, water, and then slowly getting recognized by the Israeli government. They understood with this, they cannot catch enough land, so they move to a way, maybe copying from the Palestinian, buying sheep, buying goats, cows, and grazing, shepherding, and by that, with a very small budget, maybe 200,000 euro per point, one caravan, one water tank, they can control thousands of dunams. And this is, of course, done in cooperation and full collaboration with the Israeli authority, the land authority, the civil administration, the army, and the police. It's not done alone, but by this, with this kind of small farms that there are more than 70 built in recent years, they manage to control, and this is a recent survey by Peace Now and Dror Etkes, de facto they control more than 14% of the West Bank, which is a huge territory, huge. And in a research, in an investigation we did before October 7, just a few months before, we show how settlers, by putting new outposts and attacking the Palestinian communities, the very weak Palestinian communities in the area, attacking them, harassing them, and forcing them to leave, they managed to take a huge area east of Ramallah, from East Ramallah to Jericho, the Jordan Valley. And
sorry to interrupt you, just 1 second. Just to make it clear to everybody, maybe you know it, but this is the land that should be, according to the Oslo Agreement, and I want to go to the Oslo Agreement, but this is the land that should be part of the Palestinian state. So we are talking about the land that, according to international community, should be Palestinian state. Yeah. Sorry for interrupting.
Definitely,
you.
And it's a planned move by the settlers to prevent anything in the future, but not only that, but to transfer the Palestinian communities from Area C, to push them into the Palestinian cities in Area A. But there, we've seen in recent months, the Israeli army is operating like exactly, similarly to tactics that we've seen in Gaza, destroying houses, what we saw in the panel of forensic architecture a few hours ago. So basically, the outcome that there's no safe space in the West Bank. In Area C, the settlers are operating. Of course, many of them were recruited to the army, and we hear it from Palestinians on the ground, and we see it ourselves, that settlers that were coming in civilian clothes are now coming with uniform and army weapon and have much more authority against Palestinians. And then in Area A, the army is operating, destroying the refugee camps, displacing more than 40,000 Palestinian refugees that are refugees from the Nakba. And basically, in the past, this would get huge attention, but now you can barely see it in international media. I talk to my friends who work in international mainstream media. They say it's hard to pitch it. Nobody's interested in it. And it's a huge story, both in the Palestinian communities and in the Palestinian cities. I think what we're trying to show in the different reports and we're following is that this is an organized plan. We see it from Minister Bezalel Smotrich, economical minister, finance minister. He wrote about it many years ago, and now with him and Ben Gvir in the government, this is implemented. And I think it's also important because many times in Israeli media and also international media, when these incidents are covered or in the rare time they're covered, they're talking about settler violence. But today, we cannot separate. Last week, I was in Turmus Aya, a Palestinian town near Ramallah, that 80% of the population have foreign passport, Spanish and American, US passports, and a kid was killed there, not clear either by soldiers or by settlers. And I talked to one of the representatives of the municipality, and he said, for us it doesn't matter. It's a one operation. The army, the settlers, they come with uniform, they come without uniform. He said in the past we would try to investigate who did it, a settler or a soldier. Today it doesn't matter for us. We don't care because they operate completely together. This was also happening, of course, before October 7th, but afterwards, this cooperation with the army. You see it incident after incident that, the settlers come and attack, and then the army comes and back them up, raid the village, arrest the Palestinians. It's like a pattern we see again and again. And of course, the goal, like in Gaza, is to push the Palestinians out.
Thank you. Ghousoon, final question. Connecting to what they just said. Yuval said protocols, Oren said patterns. If we put all these dots together, AI, Gaza, displacement of population from the West Bank, but everything that is happening, what kind of picture do we have of Israel-Palestine today? Yeah, what's the situation overall?
I think the basic assertion is that, Israel has demonstrated for many years, before October 23 and more now, that, apartheid and occupation are fundamental pillars of its regime. And there is one regime that controls all the land and the peoples living in it between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And it's basically based on, Jewish supremacy and permanent domination of Palestinians. This is the context and the framing of all of our work. And connecting the dots between everything that you heard today and all the other work that we do from inside Israel, from the West Bank, from Gaza, East Jerusalem, it connects between all these elements to try and give, sometimes a complicated picture of what is happening in Israel-Palestine. While, all eyes are on Gaza, as they should be, our eyes were also in Gaza, but we didn't, as you mentioned and Oren told you, we didn't forget, the West Bank, what's happening in East Jerusalem, what's happening within Israel, the persecution of the Palestinian citizens of Israel since, October 23, but also before. The refusenecks, for example, the very few individuals who refuse to draft and go to the army. Oren is the
Spokesperson.
is like the expert. Yes. Everyone who refuses, Oren goes to him or her, interview, photos, and we publish a big report both on Local Call and 972. And there are many other elements. The work of our colleagues in Gaza is just like, again, it's not only just reporting on what is happening in Gaza, but also confirming lots of the other work that we were doing. It was, and just added more to the value of our work and the need for such a platform that connects between all these areas, all the issues, and trying as much to explain, to analyze. We don't only do investigations and reports. We publish, lots of analysis. Meron is one of the most prominent journalists who publishes analysis on a regular basis, bringing also different voices from within the Israeli society. And we see as one of our purposes is to amplify these voices that are often, underrepresented, even sometimes not heard in the international media narrative. The second very important thing is that, as I mentioned before, we are a binational team. It's not easy these days to be part of a binational team when our societies are so paralyzed. But we see ourselves as a co-resistance project. We're not here just to report on what is happening and analyze what is happening, but also sometimes, although it's difficult these days, to try and dare to imagine something different. And that's what we, try to do, I guess.
There is not much to add. I want to thank all of you for being here. Really, thank you very, very much for being here.
Just one.
Yes, we have Nathan waiting there.
One last thing is that
we know we are late. We are late, so they're gonna kill me.
At 6 o'clock, can you hear me? At 6 o'clock.
Okay, 6 o'clock. They will be in the main square for Gaza. Thank you once again to the festival for having us here. And